So this is my final project for Spreadsheet Data Analytics. I'm in the group with William, and to start off, the overall report of what parts we were responsible for, Will formatted the Excel. So he formatted all of this Excel. I created all the tables in the SQL, so you can see all the SQL queries at the bottom of the Word doc. Then he did the work for step 3. I did step 4 and 5, and then he did step 6. But after doing the questions, we both went over each of the questions. Like, we looked at the other person's work just to check did we think it was okay, and then after that we wrote up this Word document, put in our pieces, and made sure it all fit well. And then we did the PowerPoint, which I have here. We did that together as well. So to start off with step 3 and what our findings were on that. So these are the graphs from step 3 for the mean prices per county 2016 and mean per 2017. Now when you look at the graphs, you can see that they both have similar shapes. However, the main difference is counties such as Clare and Dublin had a much higher standard deviation in 2016 than it did in 2017. As you can see from the graph, the standard deviation in Clare is around 650,000 in 2017, whereas when you look at it in 2016, it's significantly higher, and the same goes for Dublin. Dublin's was much lower in 2017 than it was in 2016. So yeah, that's what it says down here, that the bar in blue is the mean price, the bar in red is standard deviation. Some counties' mean price have grown, others got smaller, but there are no major differences other than Dublin and Clare's standard deviation. And we just gave the figures of how different they were and how much they fluctuated by. Then looking at the max selling price for 2016 to 2017, as you can see, the maximum prices are hugely different based on the county. So counties such as Roscommon, their max price is going to be way lower than the max price of a household in Dublin, for example. Clare and Laois also have more spent. They're the 3 most expensive houses in the country. And yeah, as we can see, we thought that you would expect the likes of maybe Mayo or Cork to have more expensive places, but in actual fact it was Laois and Clare that had the most expensive houses. And looking at the minimum selling price, we can see that there's a much smaller gap between counties here, even though there is still some big standard deviations across the 2 years. But when we look at them, they're all fairly similar and close together when it comes to price, aiming in at around some of them at about 10,000, some a bit higher at 15, and some below at 5,000, but relatively close together. And so yeah, then when we look at the mean house price per province in 2016 versus 2017, again we see there's a huge difference. Like when we saw in the counties, 2016 had much more expensive houses sold than 2017. So the standard deviation is much higher in 2016 than it is in 2017, because when we look at the graph, the standard deviation here is about 443,000, whereas in 2016 it's all the way up at 800,000. So there's a significant drop off between the two across the 2 years. Again, looking at the max price for the province, we see a similar trend where Leinster is much like the mean prices. Leinster is above the rest of the provinces, which can somewhat be expected when you look at the prices that we're going for in Dublin. The likes of those where they have much more money spent on housing. So yeah, and then similarly, you can see that Ulster, Connacht have very low max selling prices compared to Leinster, same as we saw from the counties graph as well. The minimum house price, once again, fairly similar, all of them to each other. Ulster actually having the max, like the highest minimum house price between across the 2 years, uh, which was quite surprising considering that uh, their if their mean if their average price is low compared to other provinces and their max price is low, it's interesting to see that their minimum price is actually higher than the rest of the places. So it means there's more of a price range in places like Leinster than there is in places like Ulster. Now, when we look at the mean price across the 2015, 2016, and 2017, we can see in order here that Dublin has, on average, the highest mean price across the 3 years, with the prices heading up. And one of the things we notice is that in almost every county, in every year, the prices are going up. So that could be indicative of the market. The houses are getting more expensive as the years goes on, and yeah, we can see that here. The price goes up across almost every year. This would be a good indicator of how the market's developing. Now, this is the number of houses sold in the different groups of the price ranges. So one of the things we saw was very similar coming across all of the provinces is that the vast majority of houses fit into the first bracket in the histogram, with very few coming into the other ranges. And it was interesting to see, because if we look at the data here, we can see that that's the first bracket for Connacht, and you see just 33,000 in that bracket, 54 in the next, 5, 4, and then slowly going down. Same when it comes to Leinster, not the same figures, but almost the same ratio, where the vast majority is in the first bracket, and it gets increasingly almost lower as you go up to the more expensive houses, with a few being in Leinster. But it's same again when we look at Munster, the graphs is all very one-sided. There's very few when it comes to these other brackets, and also the same in Ulster again. And this tells us that most people are buying within the same price range as each other, with like very few going to these much more expensive houses, which can be expected. And as you can see from all of these, they have their mean, their mode, and their median. So some of them will have obviously higher means than the others. So you can see Leinster has a higher mean than Connacht. They have a higher mode as well, which can be expected when you've got the likes of Dublin. And yeah, obviously higher or lower mean, so it'll be a lower mode, and their median will be in around the same. So yeah, as we can see, the majority cost between 5,000 and 1,200,000. This is true for all counties or all provinces, with the exception of Ulster, where the majority is 5 grand to 391. So as you can see, that the bands are different for each of the provinces. It's just to give you an idea of the actual size of houses that are in the first group. So Leinster's is between 5,000 and then 1,200,000, whereas the Munster one would be between 5,000 to 74,000, and so on, getting smaller as the provinces get smaller. Now, step 4. So our null hypothesis for the mean price per province, we put our null hypothesis was that the mean price for 2017 was going to be equal across each of the counties, just for the sake of having the null hypothesis, and just so we could test against it and see was it actually right. So when we put it in, you have to compare each of the provinces against each other, and when we compared Connacht against Leinster, we ended up with this U value, and then once we put that into the formula, we got our P value to be 0, and because our null hypothesis p-value was 0, we determined that we definitely reject the null hypothesis, because there's a almost impossible chance that that's the case. And then we got the same result when it comes to doing Connacht versus Munster. You put it in and it's the same result. It's less than 0.1, so we reject. Same with Connacht and Ulster, and so on. And all of them were like this. And after seeing the graph of the mean, we can tell that that's accurate, because clearly they aren't the same. So then we have to go prove that's we have to go prove or find out what the realistic